Welcome everyone to Live at 5. I'm Niki Chopra Richardson, the Associate Director of TOArts, the fundraising and presenting partner of the Bank of America Performing Arts Center in Thousand Oaks, California. Very excited to be here today, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our presenting sponsor, California Lutheran University School of Management. And now let's meet our panel. Joanne, let's start with you.
Hi there, I'm Joanne Gonzales-Forster. I'm the CEO and founder of Wishly, a new philanthropic giving app. I've worked for over 30 years in social impact and cause-related marketing, helping brands and nonprofits, and created Wishly in early 2020 by just watching young people trying to find nonprofits to donate to, trying to make a positive impact in the world, and there wasn't an easy way to do that. So Wishly is that. We're making it really easy for young people to make a positive impact in the world.
Wonderful. Can't wait to hear more about that. And now, Mark, your turn. Tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Billings, CEO of Mosiac Consulting. I founded this firm about 7 years ago. I love what I do in terms of helping nonprofits raise more money, engage their constituents a whole lot better, and just kind of make the world a better place. So as we all know, what the work that we collectively do, and we'll hear more from Joanne as well today, is super dynamic and fun. And so I'm just thrilled and honored to be here with you all today.
Wonderful. Well, let's just jump right in then. Let's hear some, I know that we'll be getting a lot of questions in the chat, but in the meantime, I have a question that I think is really important. Tell us a little bit, if you would, Mark. Let's start off with you. What's the state of philanthropy right now? Where does most of the money in the United States get generated from? Who's giving?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that's a great way to set the stage for today's conversation, right? Giving USA came out with its report, as it normally does every year, over the summer. And they partner with the Lilly School of Philanthropy out of the University of Indiana. And they have found, at least this year, for 2021, Americans gave nearly $485 billion towards philanthropic causes. Most of that money, which would be, maybe is not a surprise to some folks, but maybe to some it is, most of those funds come from individuals or families. Close to 67% of that comes from individuals and families, followed by foundations at about 19%, bequests, and then of course corporate giving. So there's just tremendous capacity out there in terms of giving. People are willing to give. Some folks ask, well, where does all this money go? Because depending on the sector that you're in, you might say, I don't see those sorts of funds or my relative share of that, so to speak. Most of the funds, believe it or not, go to religious causes. Nearly 30%, probably closer to 27%, go to religious causes, followed by education, then social services. Education and social services kind of toggle between 13 and 14%. And there's, of course, a litany of other organizations or institutions or sectors, that benefit from philanthropy overall. But those have generally been the top three.
And then, of course, when you think about, you talked about the individual giving, but then when you add in foundation giving, which I think you said was the next largest number, foundations are typically individuals who've, with means, creating a foundation. So technically that too could be sort of considered individuals making money through their foundations or giving money through their foundations. So it's always fascinating to me when those numbers come out. But I'm really curious, Joanne, tell us a little bit about, I think you work with this population a little bit more closely. So Gen Z, how is it different from the other age groups when it comes to giving? And especially where do they fit in this percentage of philanthropic giving?
Oh my gosh, they're so different. They only represent 2% of giving right now, but that's going to change really fast. So, they're making small donations. Some research has said up to $341 a year. Some says between $5 and $60. But they are making reoccurring donations. They are donating at events, and they are very, very passionate about helping people on the planet. So we just have to make giving fast and easy for them.
And so how can we do so fast and easy? And I think you said that they're passionate about giving, but they're passionate in a different way than perhaps different the other generations, right? So you talked about monthly giving. Can you say a little bit more about how a nonprofit could perhaps reach this demographic more effectively?
Yes, nonprofits really have to start thinking differently to tap into Gen Z. We actually call them GenZennials. We target 18 to 34, so we call them GenZennials. And there's a lot of similarities between GenZennials and young millennials. We target 18 to 34, so we call them GenZennials. They need to start thinking a little bit differently, start acting differently, start employing some of these Gen Zers. Really getting active on social media. It's all about social media and digital fundraising. Gen Zers, GenZennials, they are not writing checks. They're giving small donations, and they want to know what the impact is. The biggest thing I think is with them is that, if you make a donation on a nonprofit website, kind of like applying for a job on Monster. That money, you never end up hearing back from the nonprofit of, what that $5 did and what that impact was. So nonprofits need to communicate more with Gen Z. And research has shown that they want more engagement, but that's not reading e-newsletters and it's not opening snail mail. It is reaching them where they are, where they hang out, which is social media. And connecting with them with videos. And it doesn't even have to be videos, don't even have to be really produced videos. I mean, TikTok style, just holding your phone and talking and engaging and showing them what the impact of their dollar is going to make with your organization.
That's really really good point. With our own organization, monthly giving and smaller donations have been something that we've been focused on for the last few years. However, there's always this challenge, right? With the smaller gifts, once you get there, once you have a large base of a lot of small gifts, of course, that's powerful because you'd much rather have many people giving you a lot of small gifts versus a few people giving you large gifts because the former is much more sustainable. But how do you get there? How do you get to that point of having a big base? How do you engage this younger philanthropic-minded people? Mark, could you jump in on this one?
Yeah, for just to piggyback on what Joanne is saying, and just the question that you've posed here, Niki, is knowing your audience, right? And of course, today we're talking about next gen philanthropy, but even along those lines, what are the trends out there that are happening that we see and that we're experiencing as perhaps older people in our own lives? We are much more media-rich content, right? Or exposed and interested. That's not to say to let your snail mail campaign go by the wayside, because that's important for a certain constituency. But again, going back to what Joanne was saying, is how are you engaging and thinking about, even internally, who are the people that you have on staff? Who are the people that you have within your volunteer base? And how can you activate them to help you to reach out, to create content so you can kind of push things out to this new generation of philanthropists who want to hear from you. They want to hear their own name when you communicate with them. They want to hear that you understand what their interests are when you communicate with them. And, in kind of let's say kind of at the university level, and just taking a food bank or a food drive as an example, sharing what other groups have done and saying, hey, look at this school who came to us and they packed 1,000 pounds of food. You help make this happen, or do you think you can bring a group in here that will beat them in packing food? All those little pieces of engagement whether they come or not. The invitation itself keeps you as an organization top of mind, and it increases your chances of getting an actual donation from these folks, whether it's one time or reoccurring. So really, when we talk about, or at least when I talk about fundraising, I like to kind of take it back a little bit and say, let's talk about development and how are you engaging folks? And that's one of the things I think Wishley is really going to take off on in terms of being able to keep folks engaged and those who are interested in certain causes, helping them even amplify their voices to their friends and families and their networks who want to support people. I mean, giving is a very individual thing. People support people as much as they support causes. And I think that's where kind of the intersection is wonderful with the Wishley app.
One of my mentors often said, people don't give to causes, they give to people.
That's right.
They don't give to businesses, they give to people. So there's a lot of economic uncertainty and volatility in the world right now, certainly here in the United States. What would you suggest for nonprofits who are considering major campaigns, fundraising efforts or major campaigns? But actually hang on to that question for a second, because before you answer that, we're talking about engagement, which absolutely makes sense. As a donor, I mean, if you work in the nonprofit sector, more than likely you're a donor yourself, right? And so as donors ourselves, we know how we like to be engaged with. And certainly we're talking about a different generation here than I think I can safely say any one of us over here on the call, on this platform right now. But most nonprofits are so resource strapped. There's one person who's wearing 15 different hats. So how does one work this into their already overly scheduled schedule? Who wants to take that one? Joanne, why don't you take that?
Well, if you're talking about Gen Z, interns, and the volunteerism part is really big because most high schools these days require students to have 100 hours of community service before they graduate. Colleges like to see between 200 and 400 hours of community service on college applications. So, and it's really hard to find those opportunities for, if you're a student, to find a nonprofit, to connect within your town, to have, a full communication with them, engagement with them. And that's the opportunity for the nonprofits, is tap into those volunteers, work with your local high schools to get those volunteers, and then keep them engaged. Ask them to do social media content while they're volunteering for you. Ask them to inspire their friends to give and show them, the impact that they are making in the world by just a couple hours of community service.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Now back to the question. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with that. And, I don't know if that totally addresses the issue of capacity, because that in some ways takes management to handle those volunteers. Mm-hmm. But still, Joanne's on point here. You have to figure out a way of engaging these folks. And I think we've all been in situations where people have made a call for volunteers and no one raises their hand, or it becomes very difficult. And it's very different when an organization reaches out to somebody within an institution, whether it's their volunteer coordinator or something, and says to them, I need your help. That changes the game. And instead of a broad call for, is there anyone out there who can help me with this, to identifying other organizations or people that you believe can help in this fashion and inviting them to specifically do so. So I just wanted to add that.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. This is really great discussion. Let's take a quick break now to hear from our sponsors.
There are over 4,000 students at California Lutheran University,
each with our own unique backgrounds, upbringings, and beliefs.
We don't look the same
or think the same,
but we do share one thing in common. We're open to learning about the world,
open to exploring new ideas,
and open to discovering our purpose.
Because when you're open,
the world is open to you.
And we're back. So let's get going with some more questions here. So we're seeing a lot of nonprofits collaborating in fundraising. Why do you think this resonates with the Gen Z?
Collaboration is huge. And that's why we even incorporated brands into the Wishly platform because, brands, corporate social responsibility is becoming more and more important. I'm meeting with companies every day. I met with an amazing, huge company today that just hired, they have 3,000 employees across the world, a public company, and they just hired their very first CPO, Chief Philanthropy Officer. So, and this is the direction that, most corporations are going, but also collaboration with nonprofits is really important. It used to be that nonprofits that were working in the same space were as competitive as, Coke and Pepsi because they were competing for the same dollar donors. But today, it's really Gen Zers, young people are about really putting their stake in the ground and kind of shouting out to the world what they stand for, whether that's racial justice, climate change, LGBTQ rights, mental health, that's huge, ocean conservation. And so if you can get when these nonprofits work together in a cause category and collaborate to raise funds, they can be so much more successful in spreading that message and educating people and raising funds.
Mark, did you have something to add to that?
No, it's seen and proven time and time again. I would equate this to kind of having a challenge grant or matching grant out there. This is about the synergies that are created when two organizations get together to make something good happen. And that is increasingly, again, Joanne's kind of the expert in my world in this space in terms of this corporate, not even corporate, the social responsibility that Gen Zennials has an eye towards is unlike anything or any generation that we know of today.
So we talked about the lack of resources for nonprofits, but why is it important for nonprofits to kind of put resources or limited resources toward the towards attracting GenZennials donors when they actually may not have? So it's kind of like that chicken and egg. How do you find the resources to do this? Because it'll actually pay dividends when you don't have those resources.
Well, I can start, Mark. I mean, it doesn't have to start overnight. It doesn't have to be overnight and immediate. Start with baby steps to harness those $1, $5, $10 donations and the reoccurring $20 donation a month by meeting Gen Z where they are with social media and more communication. And if you just start slowly, it will start to become a little bit more natural because our baby boomers, are big donors, aren't going to be around that much longer. So the earlier you can start to nurture the younger generations and crack that code on how to communicate with them, how to harness their altruism and their social media superpower, that you're going to benefit for decades to come because these young people are, they are advancing quickly. They want to, 86% of them want to work for companies. They'll take a lower salary to work for a corporation or a company that is making a positive impact in the world. That is the most important thing to them. They are connecting and building community over shared values is extremely important. And if you can give that to them, if you can provide community and a feedback loop where you're sharing their impact and you're communicating with them on how important they are to your organization, you're going to win in the long run because they are loyal customers and they will be loyal to your mission.
That's great.
There are two sides to this, really, if I may, for a moment, that I think are both super important for all nonprofits, right? Here we are talking about next gen giving. And as you heard Joanne say, the baby steps are super important. Some people ask the same question about gift planning and how do we even get started with that? And it's the same way, baby steps. All that to say is, again, kind of just echoing here what Joanne shared. There is going to be a huge transfer of wealth happening in the next 10 to 20 years. We raise, as you heard before, and I'm going to round up now, close to $500 billion in philanthropy across the US every year, right? And hopefully that continues to increase. The transfer of wealth we're talking about will potentially be twice that much. So both ends of the spectrum and everything in the middle, which we're used to working, but both ends of the spectrum really need to be considered. And you just have to figure out internally, what do we have the capacity for today? Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years in terms of bolstering, this GenZennial approach, and just take those baby steps to get there. Again, it doesn't have to happen overnight.
It's a really good point. Definitely something, because a lot of times I think what between the two of you hit both ends of the spectrum, where most of us sit in the middle and are comfortable working with those donors on a regular basis. However, we struggle with the GenZennials, and on the other end, we struggle with our major gifts or our planned giving campaigns. So that's really, really great advice. Going to the question that I posed, but I think we didn't circle back to it. With this economic uncertainty, and volatility that we're facing here in the United States, what would you suggest to nonprofits who are still considering major gifts campaign, or like capital campaign or major fundraising efforts? Mark, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, my quick response to that is plow ahead. You're going to have to be a little bit more patient. It might take a little bit longer, but you can't stop. And if you really think about your institution and what your institution does and why it exists, that doesn't stop during a recession. If anything, even if you're, an arts organization, the need increases for your organization itself. So, I can tell you about, as recently as COVID, and this is more anecdotal, and I'll try to share some stuff from what I can recall from Giving USA. But I can tell you, even during COVID, when everything was shut down, there were organizations who said, you know what, we are going to stop, pause, we're going to shelf it for now, we need to regroup, and that's fine. Everyone was kind of doing their own thing. There were other institutions that were more bullish and said, well, we still have to do this. It might take us longer, but we still have to go ahead. And those institutions who maybe backed off fundraising, but still continued with the development work, with the engagement work, with the institutional advancement mindset, came out of the cannon hot and ready to go. And people responded in kind, where the folks who really drew back during those tough times, I wouldn't say still now because we're a few years out, but really had a tougher time re-engaging with the folks that were critical to their mission and accomplishing those goals. So I can tell you from just working with my clients at that time, that's how it turned out. Now, kind of thinking about Giving USA numbers, just hearkening back to that, when we look at recessions, early 80s, early 90s, 2001, the Great Recession, right? When we look at those periods of time, we see either a flat or slight decline in giving. Okay, that makes sense. But what you see after that in terms of how Americans respond coming out of a recession, it's gangbusters. People are ready to give. They thirst for the engagement. They want to feel good. And we all know giving feels good. They want to feel good. So again, I say, plow ahead. Think about your mission, think about why it's important to continue, and do those things that are necessary. So when this volatility settles down, or the economic uncertainty settles down, and your donor psyche improves, you're ready to go.
Jen, would you like to add to that?
Capital campaigns and Gen Z, it's a little bit of a stretch right now, I think. Building a big building or something like that, they want a little bit more tangibility, directly, like how am I helping people? How am I helping the planet in more tangible ways? And I think capital campaigns it just takes so long, and it's such a long window, right, to see the results of that. But early 2020, and also, there are causes that Gen Z is very passionate about, and there are causes that there's not so passionate about. Early 2020, when we were starting Wishly, we surveyed hundreds of GenZennials, and climate change was by far the most important cause to them. And then education and ocean conservation. We surveyed them the same survey a year later, and climate change was number 3. Mental health by far exceeded climate change. So, and that was the pandemic. We know that our young people are seriously suffering from the pandemic, from going to school at home and everything that they experience. So, focus on the little things, on how you're really helping one person here, helping an animal. They care about social justice. They care about mental health, LGBTQ rights, racial justice, social justice, girl empowerment, and not so much about building a building. So maybe stick with the big baby boomer donors for that one.
Before we get to the next question, I just have to validate what you just shared, Mark, because as working as a fundraiser myself for an arts organization, we did exactly what you said. When the pandemic hit, definitely put our fundraising on pause, especially in the early months of 2020, but did not stop with the development, did not stop with the engagement, made wellness calls to our donors just to check in and see how they were doing. Sent text messages, used little video clips, as that Joanne talked about earlier, just to share that even an empty building, because we couldn't present for almost 18 months, our theater was closed. So we never took our foot off the gas in terms of keeping them engaged, telling them stories, and not doomsday stories either, because I think you would both agree with me that no one is interested in hearing how if you don't support us, we're not going to keep our doors open, right? There's definitely a very fine line on how to deliver those kind of messages. And so we just kept it generally positive, but also very honest about where we were with things. And we hit our fundraising goal every year, 2020, 2021. And we actually started 22, again, to your point, our new fiscal year started July 1st of 2022. And we've actually exceeded our annual fundraising goal already.
Wow.
And we are now 3 months into this fiscal year. So we didn't stop, and we are reaping the benefit of keeping that momentum with our donors, and they are more engaged than ever before. So 100% validation of your point right there. So we actually have some questions coming in from YouTube and LinkedIn. So a question coming in from YouTube, a viewer in Santa Monica. I'm 25 and work in tech. I'm making almost $200,000 a year. I need to give to get some donations. What's my first step?
Well, first of all, good for you making $200,000 a year at 25. Wow, hooray. First step, download Wishly. And there's so much fun stuff that you can do on there. You can give to, if you don't know anything about nonprofits, you can give to a cause. We have collections on there, where featured collections, and if you care about ocean conservation or mental health or stopping gun violence, that we have groupings of nonprofits that you can make donations to, and you can start to follow. And we are basically social media for social responsibility. So you can start to follow and interact with nonprofits and other people who care about the causes that you care about. And we store all your donations over time. So at the end of the year, it's just one click and you can export your whole donation summary to send to your CPA.
Another great question. My parents were never givers other than church. Where can I learn more, read more about, or are there clubs I could join, like my investment club, where we talk about stocks and mutual funds to buy?
Places, where can I learn more, I guess is the best question to kind of start with. And I'm sorry to kind of throw it back to the questioner here, but it goes back to, what are you passionate about in terms of changing the world or giving outside of religion, right? Because there's a periodical for everything out there. And one of the places I would go to kind of learn more, but this is me and it's wonky, it's industry related, would be the Chronicle of Philanthropy, just to see what's happening in the world. Same would go for your local business journal. So those are kind of places I would start with. And Joanne would have to chime in on this. I also feel, being a Wishly subscriber myself, and I don't want to sound too much like an advertisement there, but it does have this kind of potential, or this club atmosphere, where you can really see what's going on and what people are supporting, and what's happening out there. So in some ways, I would say you can read about things, right, and find out that way. But I would still harken back to what interests you, and can you volunteer there? And that way you begin to learn more about the organization, number one, and number two, other types of people that are involved in that specific cause area. So you can learn more about that specific organization, and you can probably learn more about the sector overall. And I don't mean the philanthropic sector, but I mean kind of that niche area that is of your interest, whether it's environmental, beach, air, or something else, right? So there's so many options. For all of your interest areas, I can almost guarantee you there is a cause, there is someone working to make it better and improve it. So there's just so many resources out there. In terms of clubs, the only thing I can really think of that has kind of a club-like atmosphere, and this really depends on your level of giving, frankly, would be getting involved in something like a public society benefit or a community foundation, which then you would have an advisor that helps you kind of answer these questions about what's most important to you in terms of philanthropic investments. How much would you like to give? And here are all the places that you can look in considering those types of things.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to add one thing. Most communities, especially if you're in a bigger city, they have giving circles. So you can find a giving circle. There's Facebook groups. I would just Google for where you live and try to get involved in a giving circle and learn about what people are involved with in your community.
Another great resource I would love to throw in there is actually the Association for Fundraising Professionals, or AFP. There are local chapters in pretty much every community, and actually the global AFP website is a great resource. You don't have to be a member to kind of access some of those resources. So that would be definitely something I would recommend as well. But a giving circle is a really great idea, because then you get into kind of like-minded people. You're kind of connecting with like-minded people as well. And of course, we all know that the tax benefits of, working, making contributions can definitely be sizable depending on the donation that you make. So, someone had asked about deductions. Well, that's definitely the way to go. Making the nonprofit, it's a win-win situation. You get the tax deduction. Of course, you would work with your CPA to make sure that you're doing it the right way, and the nonprofit benefits.
Yeah, just to add that, and again, you said it, Niki, consult your tax professional, and I totally agree with that. Please do that. But for those of you on the younger side, or who have younger donors that are publicly traded companies, there's tremendous tax benefit to donating stock in terms of the write-off you get and the benefit to the organization. So that's also something to consider if you have constituents working at publicly traded companies, and of course, same with some seniors in the IRA world.
And also, there are so many platforms now that are facilitating crypto donations where you can donate your crypto and it liquidates it into cash for the nonprofit. So, and again, this is something, that GenZennials are all about crypto, and they're going to have to give some of that money away come the end of the year. So, incorporating some of these platforms as well is really going to help. I was talking to Aiden Riley from FarmLink the other day, and they have incorporated crypto donations into their platform, and they're seeing a really good return on that on young people just because they have it. And I think most nonprofits are a little hesitant to kind of, take that on. It's integrating another platform it takes some time and some resources to invest in, but it's going to be worth it in the long run.
My understanding is it's the same tax benefit too as stocks.
Yep.
So whether it's stocks or crypto, thank you for bringing that up. And there are organizations, the two that come to mind, there's one that's called the Giving Block, and then there's another one called Endowment, DAO, Endowment, that really help philanthropic organizations with those transactions and the liquidation and all that great stuff.
I think it's time for our next break. So thank you everyone for being here. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this next break.
I looked around at my other colleagues and I realized everybody had an MBA. And that's when I knew if I wanted to go any further in this company, I needed to further my education.
The executive MBA at Cal Lutheran is really a chance to further your education, but in an atmosphere that's conducive to your worlds.
PR, marketing, statistics, metrics, analytics, all those things that I learned in the program, I'm able to apply.
It was just great to have faculty who have the real world experience, but also understand how to impart that knowledge to folks in a classroom. It's an accomplishment that you can share with your existing network to help you kind of advance to the next level.
It actually got me into an interview for a different position.
I got promoted to the director of programming and operations for the whole music department.
You're going to walk back into your job or into a new job and really kind of have a wider view of what the possibilities are. To me, that's the number one thing.
And we're back. Thank you so much. I think we're back in the final segment, but there's just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. We actually have a question on this platform. How much should we be giving and how do we know if a nonprofit is legit? It's a great question.
Giving is very personal, right? How much you would be giving. I think the average, believe it or not, the average American household gives less than 3%. And there's a range in there of, and I'm talking way less. I'm talking it's like 1.6 to 2.2 of total income, depending on your generation, right? So if you're kind of in that 2 to 2.5% of what you earn over the year, you're about average. So if you want to be average, give it about 2.5%. If you want to be better than that, you give more. How do you know an organization is legit? Sure, there are spots that you can visit on the internet that will give you ratings on organizations. In some ways, I feel like those can be unfair. One of the things that we hear a lot about when we talk to constituents, not just clients, but donors to organizations and even board members, they say, we need to run this nonprofit like a business. And the second the nonprofit wants to spend some more money, they say, no, wait, you need to operate more like a nonprofit. You can't spend money. And so some of the ratings are based on how much a nonprofit will place or put towards their overhead, which again, this is personal now. I feel it was a little bit unfair in how you rate a nonprofit. So how do you get to know one is, again, whether it's volunteer, reach out to them specifically, say, can I have a visit? Can we do a visit? If they work with children, it's a touchy situation, but is there a way I could see a program in action? Is there a day of volunteerism? Is there a marathon or is there an event These are all ways that you can kind of soft shoe in and look from afar, and then also go in kind of behind closed doors and have conversations with folks who actually run programs, run the organization, and even ask, can I sit down with a board member or two, just even to have a cup of coffee? I just want to learn more about who you are as an organization. Going back to what Niki and Joanne said earlier, it is about people giving to people. And so you want to feel comfortable with the folks that you're giving to, because that's who's really running the organization. So I would say, at least from the chair I sit in, that's kind of the best way to go about it, is really roll up your sleeves and get in there.
Joanne, would you like to add to that?
We vet nonprofits. We make sure that the most important things to GenZennials are trust and transparency, and authenticity as well. And so we vet, we make sure that there's a couple tools you can use. The IRS is one. You can make sure that a nonprofit is up to date on their tax returns. If they don't file their tax returns within 3 years, they lose their 501c3 status. There's also Charity Navigator that you can look to see their rating, but Mark just mentioned the downside of some of those ratings, and I agree with you. And if you want to really dive into what that means, watch Dan Pilata's TED Talk from Pilata Teamworks. He's amazing, and I had an opportunity to work with him. He's fantastic. And Good Nonprofits is a platform that does charity reviews. Not all of them are reviewed, and Charity Navigator even only rates a very small amount of nonprofits. The smaller ones are not going to be there, but also doing just a Google search to make sure that there's no scams or misleading information about the nonprofit, that they haven't gotten in trouble. There are, unfortunately, a lot of bad nonprofits out there. So you need to do your homework, and Mark is definitely on it. Reach out for the organization and see if you can just meet someone. See if you can come in to, see what they're doing and talk to the people who work there, talk to their volunteers, and see what you're getting. And watch them on social media. Look at the comments. That's a really great way to tell, how successful or how well a nonprofit is doing, is look at the comments on their social media posts.
I'm going to add to that, actually, a different way that I personally have vetted a nonprofit, and someone is working in the nonprofit sector. I particularly like this. I'll make a small gift. It could be anywhere from $10 to $50, maybe even $100, just a small gift. And then I'll just wait, and I'll watch to see whether I get an acknowledgement within 24 to 48 hours, whether it's even an email, whether it's a form letter, whether they've written my name or is it a dear friend. And I want to see, it's my test gift. I want to see how they're going to treat me. Is it too small for them to even pay attention to? Or will they treat me like they would treat a $1,000 or $10,000 donor? And that will often decide for me whether or not this is a legitimate nonprofit. Of course, you do all the other work. And aside from Charity Navigator, I would say GuideStar, or I think they're called Candid now. Yeah. So, I would say that that's also a really great place. And the 990 is the tax return that you want to be looking for a nonprofit. But yeah, test it out for yourself. And sometimes, you kind of want to be in stealth mode, but you don't necessarily want to talk to anyone, perhaps, because you don't want to get bombarded. That's the other thing, right? Some nonprofits, you go reach out to them, suddenly they think you're like, ooh, fresh potential donors, and let's just all jump on them. So this allows you to kind of watch from afar. You make a little gift and you see how you get treated. And that to me is always a really great sign of a good nonprofit and a relationship building nonprofit. So I would love to, that was my thought. So just in these last few minutes, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I would just like to add that, for nonprofits to think about starting a junior advisory board with younger generations. You're not going to put them on your board of directors yet, but sort of a junior board of directors to engage them. And also really start to engage your volunteers in a deeper way. 1 in 10 Gen Z want to start their own nonprofit. And we have 1.6 million nonprofits in the US. That's about a million more, over a million more than any other country. We have a lot of nonprofits. So be open to really, if you've got those volunteers that are passionate about your cause and you hear them say, I want to start a nonprofit, say, hey, how about, do you have an idea for a program? What would you like to do? What would you like to do that's different that you're not seeing our organization do? And maybe you can run that program and we'll support you, because starting a nonprofit is really hard. It's so much administration. You've got to put together a board, the fundraising, and all the paperwork that's not the fun stuff. We all want to do the real work, which is helping people and the planet. So, take these young people and nurture that desire and say, run your program with us. Let's do a test and see if it's going to work.
How about you, Mark?
We've shared a lot today, and I just want to go back to two things that should probably be the parting words of wisdom, so to speak, in addition to what Joanne just shared. And she shared this earlier, so I'm just using what she said. Start small. Again, we've said a lot today. You've heard a lot. This is so overwhelming when you go back to sit at your desk and kind of you want to go about this and do it. Just start small. Think long term, and by long term, I mean 3 to 5 years, maybe 2 to 3, unless you have more ambitious plans. And just work on engagement, because that is capacity building within itself, right? If you have volunteers out there working on your behalf, who are carrying your flag, who are thanking people and engaging others on your behalf, that's what it's all about. And that is what the next generation is looking for, that level of camaraderie, that shared experience. Frankly, we're all looking for that, but they have it to a different degree. So start small and really focus in on what does engagement look like for us.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think that's a wrap. Be sure to tune in again every month on the third Tuesday of the month for more Live at 5.